And we're starting to see the crossover of new technologies and the idea of what else can we do with this data. We're getting to the point in the industry that question of what do we do with the data now?
To bring around 24 years of experience building high scale, high secure web applications for tier one companies across the world. But how do you truly make those data rich so that you're actually doing kind of like a 1 + 1 = 4 or 5 or 6, with one of those components being the reality first capture, and then the second component being all your other business information systems that you already have today, so that you can really get value from the two of those combined, which then results in a digital twin. What we find is that our users are actually logging in and they're going to Veerum more often than going to their email, which is super powerful.
We got Rob with us from Veerum here today. Rob, thanks for joining.
Yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what you have planned here to share with us about your guys' company and the platform you guys have built. Very impressive technology. I know we have a lot of people that are still logging in, but due to time, we'll probably start kicking off here. And of course, we do have this recorded for all the people that either join late or end up having to jump off. So we'll have the recording that we'll share out to the rest of the community as well. But I'd love to go ahead and get started here while people are still joining us. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a background on yourself and Veerum for those that are new to your company.
Yeah, would love to. So, hi everyone, super excited to be here. I'm Rob Southon. I'm Chief Technology Officer at a company called Veerum. A bit about me first, to bring around 24 years of experience building high scale, high secure web applications for tier one companies across the world. And that's really my background on the software side of things. At Veerum, I own most of the technology-based teams, obviously, as being CTO. So that ranges from our site reliability engineering team that makes sure everything's up and running and secure and compliant, performant in the cloud, to our software development team who builds our digital twin web application, into our software automation team who can actually automate a lot of the things that need to happen within the platform. And then in our R&D team as well. And they focus on things like machine learning or artificial intelligence, 3D object identification, on reality capture, and some really, really cool stuff. And then, of course, a big part of this is integrating with your other business information systems as well. So we have a whole integration team that really powers a lot of what we do. So Veerum has been actually around for around 9 years now, which is pretty crazy and actually pretty old in kind of the reality first, digital reality type of software solutions. So we really came out of that kind of idea that we can get a lot more value from the reality capture that's happening out there in the field today. And this is going back 9 years ago. We've obviously come a long ways in terms of being able to capture that data quicker, better, faster. And I'll talk a bit about that today. So what it means for Veerum and our digital twin application is we are able to really get additional value from all that reality capture that's happening out there in the field by basically aggregating it with your other business information systems that you might have. You can think about your ERPs, your content management systems, even your real-time types of systems. Bring it all into one cohesive, data-rich digital twin that even works for those existing facilities. This isn't just for, net new construction, greenfield sites. You can do this today with Veerum in those existing facilities.
Yeah, no, that's great. And like you said, it feels like the fact that Veerum has been around for 9 years, it feels like is early in this idea of integrating data. And that's why I love doing these webinars and talking with companies too, is that, it's sometimes there's these companies out there that we didn't even know were around for that long, or, and we're starting to see the crossover of new technologies and these, the idea of what else can we do with this data. And it's starting to cross different industries from the industrial side to the building side. And I think we're getting to the point in the industry that question of what do we do with the data now? Reality capture is expanding and the use case for capturing data, and then people are creating models. Well, what else can we do with the data? How could we link it back to information? And I think that's, kind of where, some companies like you guys are now pushing further. And I know there's people on the call here that are excited to see what you guys are doing, where you're at today, where you've come from, and some of the vision ahead. So Yeah, I would love for you to go ahead when you're ready and share your screen. I know we're going to go through some slides here. Those of you that have joined us, if you have questions throughout the presentation today, you're welcome to submit them using the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to answering some of them throughout the presentation and here at the end. And any that don't get answered live, we'll make sure get a follow-up as well. So, all right, thanks, Rob. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're going to dig into here is, how do you build those data-rich digital twins for your existing facilities specifically? And it's a really interesting statement. If you kind of break it down, there's a couple of pieces to this, right? So reality first. This isn't about taking BIM models or CAD models and then attaching data to it. This is really truly about what's out there in the field today. What do your existing facilities truly look like? And there's a lot of power and a lot of value with that first statement of reality first. The next part is data rich. It's one thing to have reality capture, and there's a lot of value that you can get from it, but how do you truly make those data rich so that you're actually doing kind of like a 1 + 1 = 4 or 5 or 6, with one of those components being the reality first capture, and then the second component being all your other business information systems that you already have today, so that you can really get value from the two of those combined, which then results in a digital twin. That kind of, generally accepted concept of a digital twin being a digital recreation of what's physically out there in the field. And then for those of you out there who understand kind of some of the challenges with building or deploying digital twins, you probably understand that the existing facilities is a bit of a bigger challenge out there, because you don't necessarily have that existing CAD or BIM model of your entire site. So you're really starting with that reality first. And so we're going to kind of talk about some of the steps today on how you can build those data-rich digital twins. And so I'm going to hop right to the outcomes. Like, why are we even talking about this? Why are we even doing this? Why is it important to build these data-rich digital twins of existing facilities? This is why. These statistics do not come from Veerum. These come from clients of Veerum's and users of our technology. We are seeing things today with these data-rich digital twins where we're getting 33, 35, 40% improvement in productivity. That alone is enough reason to move to a data-rich digital twin. We're seeing huge reduction in field exposure. Why? Because you have an accurate representation of your site digitally, so you can access it from anywhere. Reduction in inspection costs, reduction in CO2. And then we're seeing kind of this blanket statement. Most of your core business KPIs that you have today getting some sort of range of 20% improvement. We're not talking 2 or 3% improvements there. These are incredible numbers that we're seeing. So this is kind of like why you should be interested in these data-rich digital twins. And going back to that reality first concept, what this truly unlocks at the end of the day, it unlocks a new visual way of working. Why is that important? Humans understand visual data. They want to be able to travel to site, but they don't want to physically have to go to site. So isn't it better, just like we're hopping on Zoom now and we're connecting, wouldn't it be better just connect to your site by just hopping online and seeing that accurate representation of site? And so that's really what you can deliver through this new visual way of working. And then the information that you're then accessing is actually processed quicker, and it's retained better as well. The old way of doing work is really spreadsheets and data and maybe 2D charts and graphs, but that's not the way that humans understand data. They really understand data that's been contextualized back to the reality of site. So this new visual way of work is really, really important. So what are kind of some of the foundational pieces to these types of digital twins? There's really kind of 4 primary pieces to this. There's kind of your asset visualization. You need to do your reality capture. It's really important because there are so many different reality capture techniques that are out there. It is important that you are leveraging all those different techniques, because different techniques are going to be able to unlock different business value. For example, if you're doing inspections, maybe you want to rely more on photogrammetry, right? If you're doing kind of like site layouts, maybe just UAV drones is good enough kind of, for your particular use case. But you start combining those different data sets over time, you start doing reality capture for these different use cases, you're going to start building a really, really great, reality first foundation for your asset. to get to the next level of information, how do you start tagging it to your other business information systems? You start to having to, identify, well, what is my master tag list? What are the things that people understand, the various personas that are going to be using this digital twin? You're really going to bring it back to your tag list. And from your tag list, you can start connecting it to things like your document management systems, your content management systems, your ERP, your equipment planning strategies. You can start getting into some of the use cases here on the right-hand side, like remote maintenance planning, shutdown turnarounds. There's so many different use cases that are enabled by just moving to this asset visualization plus this tag-centric view, which then results in the bottom right with this fully integrated digital twin where you can see all of your business information systems from your P&IDs connected to your reality data, to your real-time streaming information, and everything connected in that fully intelligent reality model. This isn't about a CAD model or a BIM model. This is about that reality model giving you the true representation of site.
And that's where, historically, right, all of this information is necessary and valuable, but it's all kind of broken up in different silos. And, where does someone even go to find the current drawing of this facility? And when is it dated? And now, you have folders full of pictures because someone went and did a site walk, but then they didn't take it, the idea of now having all this information also tied to a physical representation of the true site, all being able to be found within one platform. That idea of a digital twin of your facility or your building is, that's where that power comes in, is this isn't, not all of this is like some big new idea. It's just, we're actually making it usable. We're connecting it. We're bringing it together.
Exactly. That's what this is doing. It's breaking down those silos across the data that you already have and making sure that data is available, it's accurate, it's accessible by as many people as possible. And then when you start to get into that same equation that I was talking about before, where any of this data on its own is valuable, right? P&ID on its own, super valuable, obviously. But now if you can take that and relate it back to what's actually at site, because the P&ID doesn't tell you what's actually at site. Now you start being able to give more value from your existing data. And you're right, you can find it quicker, which is funny because when we talk about productivity, we've done some really good user interviews where we find that clients actually spend something around 25% of their time just finding information.
Looking for it.
Right? Like that's insane. So now you can just go in, you can click on a pump, click on a vessel, and you'll see all your information in one click in seconds versus potentially hours. Mm. And so I kind of, led off saying that I'm going to talk to some of the trends in the digital space that are making this possible today. Like, why weren't we doing this 10 years ago, right? So the first thing that is very topical, obviously, to this webinar is affordable data capture, right? If you go back 10 years ago, it wasn't super affordable. Let's be honest, right? You could do it, but it wasn't super affordable, and you needed some subject matter expertise, like a lot of subject matter expertise, to do data capture correctly. You still need subject matter expertise to do it correctly, but it is easier and it is more affordable than ever. And what we are seeing is with kind of the advent of wearable scanning devices, it is much easier to teach someone how to do proper, accurate reality capture with a very, very low effort. And so what does that mean? This type of reality capture is very much suited to existing facilities. You can get out there, you can scan your existing facilities, and that can be your base model for that reality first digital twin. The next thing is, if you go back 10 years ago, a lot of the cloud technologies in terms of the visuals or even the power of the compute to be able to process this data and make it web streamable, it just wasn't there, frankly. And now we've reached an era where this cloud first data access is possible, where we're aggregating, millions of these different data sets and contextualizing them back to billions of reality capture data points in 3D. And we have the compute and we have the bandwidth to do this today. So that accurate digital 3D representation of site in a cloud-based format is absolutely possible. And it's possible to do it securely as well, which is a really important piece of this. The other piece that you mentioned here was, how do we start to get additional value, not just from the reality capture, but all your other business information systems, right? That is really siloed. There's a number of different categories of information that we see that are siloed. This isn't necessarily a complete view of them, but there's kind of these categories of your IoT and your sensor data. And most of our clients at least have some sort of dashboards or tooling today for a subject matter expert that's just looking at sensor data, or maybe they're looking at sensor data in a 2D map at best. So imagine now you could take that sensor data and relate it back to your 3D reality capture. Well, you can do that with tools like Veerum. Same with geospatial data, been around and been leveraged for, probably 50 years or so. But now how do you start using, the 3D tile sets that just came out from Google, where you can now be able to actually view these really, really high resolution, like satellite image captures in the context of reality? How do you start bringing in all your other GIS information that you've probably been, spending, in fact, quite a lot of money and time on, and start integrating that into your digital twin? Then obviously you're going to have a lot of documentation that's out there. Documentation is notoriously hard to find, meaning that you set up your folder structure and then try to teach someone else how to find it. This is probably where you're going to see a tremendous amount of gain. It's being able to aggregate any of your content or your documents. Project planning is huge in this space as well, right? You're doing a shutdown, turnaround, your schedule is really, really important. So bringing in that schedule information, tying it back to the work that's actually being done at site. And then we talked, of course, about your data capture, but your reality capture doesn't have to be, LiDAR. It doesn't have to be photogrammetry. Sometimes it's just simply taking a photo at site too, and being able to see that in context of reality. And then the next piece is really, how do you tie all of these things together? How do you take your IoT data? How do you take all of your documents? How do you take all of your text-based information and tie it back to reality? Well, this is where tools like Veerum come into place, where you've got this, data-rich digital twin, where you can start to see things, in the middle of your screen, like your IoT data streaming here, your pressure, your temperature, your flow, any of your sensor data coming in right down at the tag level or the equipment level. You've got a tremendous amount of data capture that can be aggregated. You've got these really immersive experiences. You can hop into things like virtual reality to experience this in an immersive way. You can really have that instant connection to your various documents without duplicating a lot of this content as well, right? So on the left-hand side, you go to a specific piece of equipment, you click on it. I'm going to demo this a bit later as well, but immediately you can see, does this piece of equipment have any work orders? What are the groups working on them? What are the related documents to this particular work order that I need to know to execute this work order? Is there a permit that I need, or has a permit already been issued? What is the height? There's so many things that you can start to answer without traveling to site with this, data-rich digital twin. And then that's when you get that immediate visual understanding of site and of current site conditions by contextualizing all of this data back to reality. And you'll notice here, and this is key for this this content in this webinar, is there's no CAD model under this. It's just reality data connected back to all your business information system.
Yeah, which is is great. There's a lot of time that people want to see that full picture, but to go use just a point cloud itself on local devices sometimes is massive. And then the effort to go through for a full model, which sometimes seems necessary, is also very laborious. And the idea of more use out of the point cloud directly in a platform like this, I think seems like where the value comes from.
Yeah, I absolutely agreed. The other thing about reality capture is, although a point cloud itself is a structured, type of data captured, it doesn't really have much semantic meaning. Meaning, you don't really know what the things are inside of that data capture. You don't necessarily know, when you're capturing an entire facility, what a pump is, what a vessel is, and then getting down to the concept of being tag centric. You also don't know, which pump is it? Is it pump, ABC, or pump, XYZ? You really don't know. And that data doesn't exist in the reality captured data inherently. So this is where the concept of visual machine learning really comes into play. That concept of being able to teach the system or teach your reality data what the things are inside of that reality capture. And the reality capture, it can be point clouds, it could be 2D images, it can really span any of the visual data that you're collecting. But we can actually start to teach these machine learning algorithms. And you can do this today end to end in tools like Veerum, where you can basically get in and you can start to identify things like the user here was was obviously, teaching it about various flow valves and safety issues. So it can even be concepts like safety issues in terms of, what we want to teach these machine learning algorithms. And then that can unlock predictions. So we can look at predictions that are getting into things, like being able to predict what the actual things are at site. You can get into as building use cases. You can get into safety use cases. You can get into inspection use cases like corrosion, that kind of thing, right? So there's all these types of use cases that can be done to give that semantic meaning to your reality capture. The other thing that's really cool here is because you can connect all this information out to your other business information systems, when you do start to make these predictions, don't do them on their own, meaning don't just look at reality capture and then try to predict, is this a valve or not? Use your other business information systems that have been connected by Veerum to really help you understand if your predictions are correct or not. Because if you have these third-party data sets that are connected to the predictions and you start to see those predictions converge to the real aggregate data, you'll have a pretty good understanding on not only what the particular prediction is, like this is a valve, but you can start to say, and this is valve 1, 2, 3. And that's where you start to be able to really unlock the power of Veerum, specifically where you can build these data-rich digital twins on existing facilities. We talked a lot about, the various technical trends that are going on in terms of why this is possible today. But there's another reason. If we kind of look at all the data that's been created and you look at kind of the era that we're in today, we've kind of gone beyond this simply being data centric kind of era to now we almost have too much data in a way where now we're trying to filter through it to figure out the data that's meaningful and impactful. And this is a really cool stat where 90% of the world's total data has been generated in just the past 2 years. So if you think about that statement, that's insane. So it creates a really, really big opportunity here for us, a problem too, right? Because let's sift through this data. But organizations that are out there, they're also seeing this data abundance, right? So what do you do with that data? How do you get value from it? And, there's really these core things that I always speak to that I think are really, really important. Organizations must ensure their data is available, meaning, well, how do you make it available? There's a couple of easy ways. You put it into a web-based tool like Veerum, so that's available to everybody. You break down silos, right? You make sure it's accessible to everyone, meaning give access to everyone. There was times where we saw, subject matter expert tools were the only tools where you could load in reality capture. That's no longer the case. Give everybody at your organization access to all the reality data that you're capturing, all your CAD models and BIM models, P&IDs, all of your documents. Make sure it's all accessible to everyone, and make sure it's complete, and make sure it's organized. And the best way to organize it that we've seen is in a way that humans think about it. And that's really at the site level or the project level or the work scope level, where you could then start breaking down to, hey, I want to go into a world map to see my data related to a given site, rather than going into, let's say, a common content management system. And then you're just sitting there and be like, hey, I got to figure out where to find the data for this day. It's very, very hard to do. And then you want to make sure it's accurate. Of course, it's really important. You want to make it secure. Very, very important, right? With Veerum, we take security as obviously a top priority, being ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And then you need to make sure it's ready to be analyzed. And this really speaks back to that data abundance era that we've entered, right? So if you have too much data, it's not really ready to be analyzed. You need to make sure it's organized, and you probably want to contextualize it. It goes back to that tag-centric data model. Tie it back to a given tag, tie it back to reality data, and now it's ready to be analyzed and actioned. And that's where you get that visual understanding of site. And that's where you get the most value once you've done all of those things. The great news is, if you want to check the box on all of these, how do you do it? You do it with a visual digital twin. That's the answer here.
Yeah, I love seeing these stats, and it also makes me, then ask, okay, if 90% of the data has been generated in the past 2 years, what's going to be generated in the next 2 years, or the next 5 years? That's part of what makes me so excited about all these technologies is I feel like though we've come a long way, we are just now still at a point that we're starting to realize the potential with all this data and the use cases, and companies like you guys are putting a focus on building it and making the data more useful. So I think the years ahead are going to be massive for everybody, which is what's great about learning about all these platforms and capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're doing is game changing for people, and that, this visual way of doing work is kind of a new revolution in technology, and it is the future, but it is the tip of the iceberg, meaning those stats that I was showing kind of at the start of the webinar in terms of the value gain, that's the value gain today. Imagine the value gain tomorrow or a year or 4 years from now. There is no going back from this new way of doing visual work because of the value that we're seeing, and the value will just get higher and higher, especially as things like reality capture comes down, tools like Veerum become more prevalent, easier to adopt, right? So the value is just going to go up.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's always challenges with new innovation or new ways of doing things. These new technologies create challenges. But I think they're still, like you said, you look at what the results are, and it is still worth figuring out new processes and working through some of those difficulties of maybe changing from the old way of doing things, because the value is there, the value is proven, and it's going to move that direction. Now it's, organizations have to take the time and the effort to build those new processes, which is also, like you said, it's awesome. We have so much data. It's almost so much that it's overwhelming. And that's where, again, great processes being organized, those points you made here, very good points.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the easy ways that we've seen our clients be successful, with this type of implementation is by choosing a tool like Veerum that's super quick to value, meaning you don't have to wait a year for this to get up and running. You get up and running in 48 hours. And by the end of the week, you have, end users actually using it, like super powerful. That's the first piece. But then two, embed it into some of your existing workflows. So for example, you don't have to completely change the way that people do work today, but let's say like remote maintenance planning. Okay. So however you do it today, great. And now here's another supporting tool that you can use, these data-rich digital twins, and then, go out and do your maintenance planning with Veerum and see which you prefer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to hop directly into a live demo to actually show what this looks like now. So I'm going to stop sharing here.
Perfect. And I do see a couple of you guys that have submitted some questions. We're going to wait. I think some of those will be addressed through the demo here, talking about some of the process and showing the data. And then we'll circle into some questions as well if we haven't hit them yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share. You should be able to see a world map now.
Yep. Yeah, we got you.
All right, so this is a live demo of the Veerum web application. So data-rich digital twin, that new visual way of doing work. So what's the first welcome screen? It's that visual way of doing work. Understand where your data is visually. This gets into that concept of being able to aggregate my business information systems and all of my reality capture and all of that data really at the site level. So you can start to do all of your work visually. You can, of course, click on any of the dots where you want to visit a specific site, or you can go to any of your favorite sites that you might have favored over here on the left-hand side as well. So I'm going to go over to this. This is just a demo site here of an operating facility, and you'll see the baseline layer to all of this is your reality capture, right? This happens to be a point cloud, could be 360 panoramic imagery, it could be, mesh 3D tiles, etc. Could be virtual reality, any of those kind of immersive ways that you want to visualize your data. From there, can you bring in and might you want to bring in things like your CAD models as well and do all of this from the area? Maybe you're retrofitting an area of your facility with CAD. Bring that in as well. So we're not saying don't leverage CAD. We're just saying start reality first and don't be reliant entirely on your CAD models to build these digital twins. And then the next piece of it is, how do I start getting in and clicking on a specific, piece of equipment to view all that aggregate data? There's a bunch of ways of doing it. I can click on a certain piece of equipment, but really want to make this as easy to discover the information as possible. So, if we go back to kind of, our first days or the first time we used Google, what was the first thing that we did? We entered the Google search and there was just like a simple white interface and there was like a search bar, right? So I always recommend everyone to go in first time you're using Veerum and just search and see what's returned to you. You'll see immediately 1,000 results of things that are at site within my specific view. And then depending on my persona or what I want to do at site here, I might want to drill down or filter down to things, for example, with a work order description. So now it's showing me the objects or the components or the pieces of equipment, or maybe even some sort of observations or safety incidents that are related to a work order. So here I'm really, in a really humanistic way, starting to discover the data that's at site that's already connected to all these business information systems. Now, this is just a simulated environment, but in a real client environment, this would be hooked up to your real sensors for your entire site here. So you can see things like pressure, temperature, flow streaming in real time from those source systems back into the 3D context of site. Very, very powerful now, because you're not in the 2D view, or you're not, just in a schematics view of the given site. You'll see it brought back 6 different pieces of equipment that have work order information. I can click on them, zoom me to that specific one, and we can start to see the other types of business information systems that are now connected to that. So this is where we start breaking down those silos of information. So here it's brought in information that it's found. So this specific equipment tag here has a specification related to it. That's going to be sitting out in my content management system. I can go ahead, I can click on that. It's going to bring me directly to that specification in whatever system I happen to be using. Doesn't matter if Documentum, OpenText, SharePoint, whatever. It'll bring me there, authenticate me to that document so that it's secure at all times. All of our clients, or most of the clients out there, are going to be using a tool such as Maximo, SAP, one of these tools that really has, a lot of your equipment information, probably some sort of work order management system as well. So being able to bring in and aggregate things like your flock, like the make and model, going back to the related documentation from the manufacturer of this particular compressor is really powerful. This is that concept of going in, making sure my data is accurate, because otherwise I'd be going to try to find, the manual for this given compressor. I don't need to. I just go in and I go directly to the right link. And the next piece is my work orders. So here I can see there's 2 open work orders. I can look at all the metadata that I need to either complete this work order here. I can look at a planner group. Do I have other, SIMOPS that's happening in the area that I have to worry about? Do I need a certain permit for this? And now I can start to take, additional value from that reality capture that we were talking about. Let's say this particular compressor needed to be replaced. I'm doing some routine maintenance on it. I know I need to replace it. Well, what am I going to want to know? I'm going to want to know, do I need a permit? Does it need to be an ad height permit? What do I need equipment-wise to be able to actually rip and replace that particular compressor? Do I need some sort of forklift to get in there? And if I do, what is the actual clearance that I need between these 2 steel beams so I have the right equipment at site? Do I need scaffolding? What's the height of that scaffolding? So I'm doing all of this remotely, and I'm doing, frankly, a lot of that pre-work and planning before actually going to site, which is saving me that site visit, making me really have all the information at my fingertips with a single click of a button, with that added context of site, which is really, really powerful. At any point here, we happen to be looking at point cloud data, but I mentioned if you did want to hop into that more immersive view, hop into that virtual reality view of your site, or also if you are getting into more of those kind of like maintenance inspection types of, personas or workflows, maybe you want to look at the high definition 360 panoramic images of sites. So you can do that as well. And you still have the power of all that connected information. So these kind of bounding boxes or cuboids over here on the right-hand side still have all that connected information that we were seeing in the point cloud or reality capture view, but it's now in a new 360 panoramic view. And you can kind of do that almost Google Street View walkthrough of site, which is really powerful. And then when we get back talking about machine learning and being able to automatically identify things at site, wouldn't it be great to start making predictions on some of these things as well? So Veerum has an integrated solution for doing so, meaning you can literally do all of your machine learning directly in Veerum, from actually training the data to being able to deploy new machine learning models and to be able to actually see the results of those predictions. Now, traditionally, we've done that with 2D data, but I'm really excited to announce here for the first time, we are opening up a beta program for a 3D object detection program as well. And that's going to be coming out in the next few months. So if there's anyone who is on the call today who would like to join that beta program, we have really limited availability on the program. We already have some clients who are very interested in that, but it's the concept of being able to use a Veerum supplied SDK or software development kit to be able to do machine learning on 3D data from data hosted directly in Veerum. So that's very, very powerful as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that today.
Yeah. And so
yeah, I even just while we're at that point, like that, this is one of those steps we're seeing in the extra use of reality capture data, where historically, used to go out to a facility like this and scan just to go capture a tank for a specific project. And then all this data would just get thrown away or archived off. And yet, it's very often someone then needs that information, like you just showed. Hey, it just so happens now we need to remove that pump, and now there's that next trip to the site and the tape measure and the pictures and just the option to get in here at any point and walk through visually and pull with a measurement tool. You end up getting 20 use cases out of the same data set that you used to just go back out for one specific job.
Exactly. When I was really filtering down the data there by just looking, at the work orders from the, if you kind of put your AI ML hat on here, I could start looking at AI performance metrics related to predictions of things in the field. But it really, spans any of the types of use cases that you might actually be looking to get value from, right? You can start doing things like we can get into an advanced search type of functionality where you say, hey, show me all the work orders that are assigned to me and due in the next week. So then I have a really good idea of where they are in relation to each other. I have a very, very clear list of all the steps or operations that need to be completed on those work orders. So when I get to site, I am doing it safer than I was before because I have more information, right? But I'm also doing it faster, and I'm more effective because I'm more educated, and I have all the related information at my fingertips. So, when we start to think about all the different use cases and all the different value, it is almost overwhelming. And we start to look at just some of the data at this given site. Like I can start showing all the types of data that's actually aggregated here. You'll see.
Oh, yeah.
Not filtering it down, it could actually get a bit overwhelming. And if we start looking at some of them here, we're getting into like spill predictions, we're getting into scaffolding planning, we're getting into flow, we're getting into near misses from a safety operation perspective, right? Now, all the user interfaces, are built very, very simply, so I can quickly filter that down and say, you know what, I just want to know where all the near misses are at site. And now I've got that added context of, you know what, maybe they're all around this staircase, and maybe I've got a problem here of signage or perhaps even worse, where I need to be doing an improvement to site so that this doesn't become a safety incident.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So we've really just kind of scratched the surface of, what's possible from both a demo perspective, in Veerum. But I want to go back a bit now to some of the content in the presentations and the slides to really kind of hit home like why we're doing this, and then just recap some of the building blocks to what's making this possible today.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I appreciate the live demo. It's always nice jumping in that, even if for a short time, because, slides, you get a lot of good information, but getting to really see how you're maneuvering in there and what the data looks like, it really kind of gives that next level view for people. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we obviously take, as I said, security as a top priority. So unfortunately, I can't show a real live client site, because the data needs to be kept obviously very secure and private. But I wish I could, because some of these client sites would literally be aggregating. It would be very common to be aggregating somewhere in around 10 million different pieces of information across 10 different systems. Mm-hmm. So now you're going in, you're clicking on a pump, and you're literally seeing potentially hundreds of different pieces of information about that and links to these different source systems. And you've really, moved to that new visual way of doing work, where all of your workflows start with Veerum. They start with your digital twin. You log in, to your workstation in the morning, and you're probably used to going to email. But if you really want to have a good understanding of what's going on at site and what you need to be prepared to do at site, what we find is that our users are actually logging in, and they're going to Veerum just as much as, or more often than, going to their email, which is super powerful.
Yeah, that's great, especially when they get it into their system of like, that is how they are, putting in work orders, and it's kind of known that that's the process, or somebody put in the safety plan for the day, or whatever that be. One other point I like that you made too earlier is making that data available to everybody on your team, because you look at, like you turned on all the tags there and all the different things that data is being used for. When you make the data available to everyone, and to teams that maybe historically weren't the ones receiving, point cloud data or scan data, that's where even that creativity of per client and per company, they're going to come up with use cases we didn't even think of, and so making that data available and accessible, and really start getting the brainstorming between different teams and how they could use it.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, probably 95% of the use cases and value come from that exact scenario, where, Veerum has, our ideas, and we have deep domain knowledge specifically in the industrial space. But, 95% of the features and functions value still comes from our clients today. And that's a journey that we love being on, because they're discovering new things just by using our technology, which is a really cool, kind of place to be in.
Yeah, that's great.
So I want to dig a bit more into kind of the art of possible with these integrations, because we've talked a lot about kind of one of the foundational pieces to getting additional value, from these data-rich digital twins is connecting to your business information systems. And this is absolutely key and true to a data-rich digital twin, because you can do reality capture, and most reality capture devices probably even have a lightweight web viewer. You can go in, you can see it. You're going to get some value from it, but how do you really start to get that next level of value that we're talking about today, and that our clients are getting today? Well, you connect it to these various pieces, third-party systems that are out there. So the way that Veerum does this is pretty unique, in that we basically have this data model, or a data layer, that sits above all of your reality and your CAD models. We call those objects. Objects are a layer of data represented by things like bounding boxes or tags, the kind of like, blue or colored cuboids or boxes. They could be represented by other things as well. But that really gives the concept of, hey, in this 3D space, here's this thing that the business cares about, right? So going back to the example, it could be, something I care about is a work order, or a piece of equipment, or a safety incident, or this is where I plan to put the scaffolding. All those are, potential, use cases for these objects, but all of those can then be automatically tied back to any of your other business information systems. So the way that Veerum does this is by having primarily API integrations with those third-party systems, like the SAPs of the world, like Maximo, for example, or being able to do data loads from those systems as well is another way that we can do it. And then so we tie it back to the object, so that when you then go and you click on a specific piece of equipment or a safety instance, perhaps you have immediate connection not only to those business information systems, but you have immediate connection to the metadata that is relevant to you, meaning you can search it from one web-based interface. And that's really powerful. It goes a bit back to my Google analogy that I gave before. The first time you went into Google and you had a search, and you search, and it was literally searching the entire internet. And it was like this whole wealth of information that you didn't know you had access to. Why didn't you have access to it? You didn't have Google, or maybe you were using AltaVista or something before, right? But you didn't have one simple interface to find all that information. And that's really what Veerum does. it really searches all those different pieces of information across all those systems to give you a wealth of information that you didn't have in one simple search. But then instead of just showing it in a Google text-based search result, it shows you back in the context of site, which is like insanely powerful if you think about it. And it's really tied back to your business information systems and your reality capture.
That's great.
And so just to kind of like recap, we kicked all of this off wanting to talk about what are some of the key pieces to building these data-rich digital twins for your existing facilities, right? And so just want to recap. One, you need to be able to visualize your asset or what's out there in the field. So reality capture is foundational to all of this. And you don't need these CAD models for these sites anymore. If you have them, great, use them, leverage them, but you don't need them. You do need to start thinking about your data from that master tag list. We call it tag centric type of data model, but you don't need to wait until you have some sort of perfect tag list or master data management model where everything's connected. Don't worry about that, because what Veerum does and what a smart connected digital twin will do, it'll show you what data is connected, it'll show you what data is not, and then you can make those data connections later as you're discovering this data. So it's actually a tool to help you tighten up your data models within your organizations today. And then that's when you can start getting value from all these various use cases. There's very, very clear ROI on a lot of these use cases, right? From your shutdown turnaround planning to your remote maintenance planning, inspections. Like there's literally, we actually have over 100 use cases. There's probably like 5 really, top high value use cases that we see getting the most value, equipment strategies. There's so many that we can get into. And then at the end, you need to be integrated, right? A digital twin is not a digital twin with just reality capture data. You need it integrated to your other business information systems, right? In the middle here, you'll actually see even a PDF PNID, which is integrated back into the reality model inside of Veerum. You can click on the various symbols in the PNID and actually access the related information in the 3D view. All of that combined gives you that intelligent reality model. So and that's really the solution to existing facilities, digital twins, is that intelligent reality model.
Which is it's a big deal for the industrial facilities. There's certain, and you probably know way deeper than I do, but there's certain requirements of like, they have to have these drawings, they have to have PNIDs, there has to be access to data of assets, and you have to track what's changed. And so maybe even different from, per industry. And I know there's so many different types of industrial facilities. And would you actually explain that a little bit? I know obviously you guys are very heavy in the industrial side here with facilities. Does your platform, do you kind of see it being adopted and spanned across different industrial facility industries, or, what's your target?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, if we kind of go back, to the start of Veerum, we were very much focused on large industrial capital construction projects. And, so we still have, really, really strong, offering and background on the construction side. We have a lot of clients who are seeing a lot of value in other, industrial types of, use cases as well. So when we start getting into mining, for example, we have a lot of mining clients getting a lot of value out of this. You start getting into manufacturing, right? Large scale manufacturing, great use cases for this as well. It's really any type of facility. The more complex, the better, because you're going to see even more value, I would say, from the more complex ones. You're going to see higher value, higher ROI, especially when you start scanning it. But even when you get into large linear assets as well, you can start getting into infrastructure, right? Green energy. We have one of the world's largest hydroelectric dams who uses our platform today. So there's it spans a number of different industries, but primarily complex facilities and the more complex industrial sites tend to be adopting this technology and getting tremendous value.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's even similar to, the adoption process, I think, of scanning, right? Is like, even when it was expensive, facilities, because that ROI is there, it's a very expensive process to document and to change out equipment, and so they seem to adopt the newer tools and the newer technologies even faster than other industries. But I ask that because I can, seeing the platform and seeing the capabilities, being that we work in a lot of different industries, I'm like, man, there's application for this all over, and it is that next level of how we can use the data where, I would say from the companies I've talked with, there's not a lot of companies that are focused on this level of being able to use data and integrate sensors, whether it's a building industry or an industrial industry or, so no, it's great to hear that it kind of has that crossover, and but obviously industrial side is a big focus.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other piece of this is sometimes when, people first look at this, especially if they're new to the digital twin world, they're like, well, wait, this seems like a big heavy lift. And the reality is, at one point it was like, if you go back, maybe 6 years ago, there were offerings out there in the market that would take you a year before you were kind of like, starting to see value from it. That's the other big trend that has hugely changed the game in terms of adoption of Veerum and of tools like this, where you can really get to value quickly. Like I said, 48 hours, by the end of week 1, you're getting value from it. But then you start getting an incremental capability and an incremental value from it by really looking at that use case enablement. So bring it on, bring on Veerum to do shutdown turnarounds. Swap to do shutdown turnarounds, or bring it on to do your maintenance planning. Pick one use case that you want. Go ahead and do that, prove it out, and then the same technology, in our case, the same subscription, unlimited users, unlimited data. So you have no additional cost. Now just start rolling it out for other use cases, and you're going to get that incremental value here.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, there are a few quick questions here I'd love to throw out. One is, how are the IoT sensors connected with the point cloud data? I think some of that was shown in the demo there, but is it through just linking with tags, and you've got kind of the back end that's linking to sensor information?
Yeah, great question. So, you answered it correctly. I'll get it kind of a bit more technical. There's a number of different ways of connecting any of the data, including the IoT data, back to the reality. So the first one is, if you do have any existing data set that does understand where those are in the field, where the sensors are today, we can bring in that data and leverage it to automatically, recreate those in 3D. So they can come from GPS locations, they can come from a CAD model. Sensors generally aren't, in a CAD model, but maybe, the piece of equipment that is in the CAD model that is attached to the sensor, we can bring that data in and then just automatically have everything placed and set up in 3D. You're good to go. In the case where you don't have any of that, data today, maybe don't even know where the sensors are, you can go in and physically just place them. It literally takes 2 seconds. You can place those in Veerum's digital twin immediately, and the whole integration piece is automatic. So literally all you're doing is you're going to the left-hand side, you're saying place the object in 3D, and then that object lives in perpetuity. Even if you do new reality capture, it's all aggregate, and that object lives there. And then the third option is, that's where you might get into, joining the Veerum AI ML SDK in the beta program there, where we are actually training machine learning algorithms to teach it what those things look like in the field. So for IoT sensors, maybe you might be teaching it what the equipment looks like that's related to the sensor, or maybe you want to teach it actually what the physical sensors look like in the field as well.
Okay, great. Another question I thought was a good one here is, how does the platform deal with condition data over time? Is there a function for like looking at chronological between data sets, or is there any AI capability to identify change? So, if you go to a site and maybe there's a difference, 2 months later and they rescan it, is there a way to update or look at different timelines of data?
Yeah, absolutely. Just due to the time constraints, I was only probably able to show maybe about 2% of our total functionality.
Sure.
And application. But yeah, there's a number of features and functions that are going to be tied back to time. So on the right-hand side, you have simple like, date filters to be able to filter down just reality captures, analytics layers, CAD models, on a given date, which is kind of like a timeline, right? Show me what the facility looked like between this date and this date. You're going to see all the reality capture. At the object level, we didn't get into the more advanced searches, but that's where you can start bringing in the time of like work orders, for example. Show me all the work orders that are assigned to this planner group within this time frame. And so you have like date pickers where you can like choose those types of things. And then we also have a whole other kind of like charts and S curves and progress 2D charts that exist in the platform, where you can get into things like charting progress over time, charting installed versus not installed over time. And then the last part of that is, can you actually do some sort of analytics or analysis of the data sets using Veerum? The answer is yes. Well, that's where you can start getting into some of the more advanced features or functions like progress monitoring, where our analytics layers can actually look at what's the difference between this capture and the next capture. What's the difference between this design model and this reality capture? And we'll automatically show you what that looks like right down at the object or the component level, right down to saying, was this installed? Yes or no?
Awesome. Great. Is this your, just want to see, I know you're on another slide here. Is this our ending slide?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Okay.
And, it really ties it back to the kind of like, why are we doing this? I put some pretty big numbers out there, some pretty bold numbers in the first slide, talking about 33% productivity increase. As I said, that isn't a number that Veerum just, took out of thin air. This is our clients coming back to us and telling us what they're getting through that use case enablement using Veerum. The productivity increase here is huge. The safety increase is huge. We also have to think about, for the asset owners and for operating these facilities, how do we retain and attract new talent? And when we look at the new workforce, when we look at knowledge retention for the existing workforce that might be exiting, how do we actually remain competitive, and how do we actually retain and attract that talent? This is a really good way of doing that, right? Like, I kind of come from, the video game culture and background, where the first code I ever wrote was for, building video games. Like, that's what a lot of the market out there is used to. And they're going to expect this in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and we see a lot of that happening. We see a lot of, across so many industries, a lot of the people coming in now as project managers and people that are project engineers that are looking to deal with this data. They're coming out of school learning about virtual reality and models, and yet sometimes they'll step into a company that isn't yet in that process, and they get handed stacks of old drawings, and they're like, we hardly know how to read these, nowadays. The industry is moving to that visual way, and the new workforce is going to be wanting to push that, wanting to adopt it. And like you said, I think it's a great process to also hand over that information, because historically, and I've worked in a lot of oil and gas facilities and places, and there's always that, oh, hey, Bob, that's been here for 30 years. He's the guy you have to ask. He knows where every valve is. Like, having somewhere to plug in that information and start tagging, so that the new workforce pulls out the iPad and searches, and says, hey, where is valve 34? That exactly. Information now gets retained somewhere and passed over to that new workforce. So that's definitely a big value there.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have this big, loss of knowledge as your talent, will inevitably at some point leave, right? So how do you retain that knowledge? There's tremendous value in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I think we answered most of the other questions that came through the demo, but I'm also sure that Rob and the team would be happy to connect if there are additional questions. And like you said, Rob, you guys only got to show a little bit of the tools in the short live demo here, but this is a great way for us to just share a little bit about what you guys are doing, your platform, where the fit is, really just showing that next level of using this data that we love talking about. We're very excited about new innovation and technology that has to do with mapping data and making it usable for different teams, different personnel. So really appreciate you coming and sharing your platform with us today. And we'll make sure that everybody has access to your guys' links and information, which you guys can see here on the screen as well, for Rob's email. And we'll make sure that any other questions that come through, we'll get in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me. It's really exciting to share this technology and share a bit of the Veerum story. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for joining. It is an exciting time. Thanks everybody who joined us. We had a nice little global presence today, and we got plenty of people that'll be watching after we're done. So thanks again, and we're excited to be building the future together. We'll talk to you again soon.